And you will recall back in 2002, 2003, a very strong case was made for a war with Iraq against Saddam Hussein. One of the folks involved in making that case was Douglas Feith. He is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute and director of the Center for National Security Strategies, the author of the book War and Decision, Inside the Pentagon and the Dawn of the War on Terrorism, Hudson.org, the website for the Hudson Institute. Douglas Feith, welcome to the program.
Good to talk to you.
Thanks for joining us. What, if I may, just to kind of start this thing out, what in your mind, in retrospect, was the? Do you have any concerns or regrets about our nation having gone to war with Iraq?
Well, I think that the rationale for the war was strong. Naturally, one has regrets about various mistakes that got made, but I think fundamentally the president made the right decision that removing Saddam Hussein from power was important and valuable, and that the risks of leaving him in power were very substantial.
And yet Saddam Hussein was the principal enemy of the Iranians. You know, he had lost 1 million people. The Iranians had lost 1 million people in the war between Iraq and Iran. And he was our Sunni bulwark against that Shiite force. Bob Ney, the former congressman who got taken down in the Jack Abramoff scandal, he's got a new book out. Just literally came out today. It's called Sideswiped, and in his book, he talks about sitting in with Faoud El-Zayat, who was basically an arms dealer, I guess. He made airplanes, but weapons of war. And he was meeting with Bob Ney in London, discussing Boeing and other contracts that had to do with Iran. And they were in the Ambassador Club dining room, this private club. And if I can just share a couple sentences with you, I'd like to get your take on this. He said, Faoud turned to me and said something that's burned into my brain. He pointed at two men who were sitting at the table near us, involved in an intense conversation. He said, "Do you see those two men?" He said, "Do you recognize them?" And Bob says, "I knew one of them. The man was to the left is King Hussein of Jordan's brother, the crown prince, but I didn't know the other guy." And Faoud replies in a very calm but firm tone, that other man, not King Hussein's brother, but the man sitting with him, he said, "This man will lie to your country. This man will catch the ear of your president. This man is a wanted criminal in Jordan, yet he sits with the king's brother here in London. This man is here in London carrying out one of the biggest schemes in modern history, and this man will soon take your country into war in Iraq. His name is Ahmed Chalabi." Do you think it's possible that you and all the other guys in the Bush administration were conned by the Iranian government through their agent Ahmed Chalabi into taking out their principal enemy Saddam Hussein on their behalf?
No, I don't think that analysis is right. I think it's wrong in a number of respects. I don't think that the decision making in the U.S. government was driven by Chalabi or any other one guy. I don't think that the United States was conned. It was not a con that Saddam Hussein was a very dangerous guy.
Oh, come on! He was writing a novel about a romance novel. He had no weapons of mass destruction.
Well, it's not true that he had no weapons of mass destruction. He not only had weapons of mass destruction, he had used them against the Kurds in northern Iraq. He had used them against Iran. Saddam was the first person in history to use nerve gas on the battlefield.
And we just, okay, modern nerve gas, yeah, I was thinking of World War I, but the UN went in, they took that stuff out, they destroyed it, the weapons inspectors said it's not there anymore.
No, that's not what the weapons inspector said. I mean, I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding about the whole weapons of mass destruction issue and programs in Iraq. If your listeners are interested in the facts on this, what I would urge them to do is, on the internet, you can get the report of the Iraq Survey Group, which was a bunch of intelligence officials sent in by Australia, Britain, and the United States after Saddam's removal. And they issued a 3-volume report, which is available on the Internet, that explained the status of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction programs. And Iraq was a country that had substantial weapons of mass destruction programs. The big mistake that was made by our intelligence services before the war was the belief that Saddam was maintaining chemical and biological weapons stockpiles. That was a gigantic mistake.
But there are other countries who have those stockpiles. We have those stockpiles. If they're not intending to use them against us, and I don't recall any specific evidence that Saddam was coming against us or against our direct interests, why did we do what Iran wanted and take him out?
Saddam was very hostile to us. We had fought a war against him in 1990-91 when Iraq had invaded Kuwait.
Right, after April Gillespie told him he could, right?
And the UN, with American support, had put in place a set of containment measures. Among those were no-fly zones in northern and southern Iraq that were patrolled by American British aircraft. And Saddam, when the Bush administration came into office, was shooting at those aircraft on a daily basis. When the Bush administration came into office, the only place in the world where American forces were being fired at every day, virtually, was over Iraq.
No, it was the only place where we were enforcing a no-fly zone.
Okay, but your point that he had no hostility to us or was not of concern to us is just wrong. And
if we had been ignoring him... Wait, hang on just a second, Doug. If we had said we're going to deal with Saddam Hussein the same way that we deal with Robert Mugabe, we're going to let him kill his own people, do you think he would have been shooting at us?
But it wasn't just his own people. The reason we were patrolling those no-fly zones was he had started an international war against Iran. He fought that for 8 years, and as you rightly pointed out, around 1 million people were killed.
And we supported both sides in that war.
And then 2 years later, he invaded Kuwait. So it's not true that he was a danger only to his own people. He invaded Kuwait and was then threatening Saudi Arabia.
Well, he invaded Kuwait, he said.
Hang on 1 second. And in the course of the war, where we threw Iraqi forces out of Kuwait, he fired rockets at both Saudi Arabia and Israel. So your point that he was a threat only to his own people is not correct. Tom, what I would say is this. I certainly understand and respect people who argue that in balancing the risks of leaving Saddam Hussein in power or removing him by force, President Bush made the wrong decision. Okay, I think he made the right decision, but I certainly understand that there are reasonable people who could strike that balance differently.
Mm-hmm.
But the argument that Saddam Hussein was not a threat to us, that we were not worried about him, that he didn't have WMD programs, that the whole thing was made up, is an argument that is not accurate. It's not based on the facts.
Okay. Douglas Feith, Hudson.org. Mr. Feith, thank you so much for being on the program today.
Good to talk.